Okay, to make this tomato wine, I will be using the following. I'm going to use 6 pounds of tomatoes. Whatever variety, that's your choice. I'm going to be using 4 cups of sugar. I need the juice of 2 lemons. This time around, I'm going to be using a 1/4 teaspoon of Red Star Premier Blanc. Again, if you don't have wine yeast, you can use bread yeast. We want to have straining bags enough to hold all of our tomatoes. We want to have on hand at least 1 gallon of clean filtered water. We need to have a primary fermenter, preferably one with a wide mouth opening so we can put in our straining bags. We need a 1 gallon secondary fermenter, jug, carboy, demijohn, take your pick. We are going to need an airlock with bung for our secondary fermenter. And I also should point out that this particular fermenter does have its own built-in airlock, although you could use, with a smaller bung that comes with it, a standard size airlock. Having a hydrometer with testing tube will come in handy, although not absolutely necessary. And of course, using your appropriate sanitizer of choice, we want to make sure that all of our equipment and utensils have been properly cleaned and sanitized before use. And that's what I'm going to be using to make this wine. Okay, the very first thing, if your tomatoes are so equipped, is that we want to remove the attached stems. So we can pull these off. Let's hang on to that one. Now then, if you have any yucky ones that, let's just say, got some issues, you might want to set those aside. And the same thing here, set that aside. I mean, we probably will just cut that off, but we just don't want to use the ones that got issues. Now, the next thing we want to do is we want to give these a good rinse. And with that having been done, let's get these yucky ones out the way. We want to now go ahead and begin the process of chopping these up. Rough chop will do. And we then want to get those into a straining bag. It's not going to be a pretty way of doing this. I can see that right now. Well, yeah, it's going to be a little messy. And we're just going to repeat the process for the rest of them. All right. Let's go ahead and tie this off. And let's go ahead and get these in a pot. Now we want to take about half of our water and put it in the pot. Roughly half. We'll add more as needed. And we're going to bring that up to a boil. All right, now that our water has come to a boil, let's go ahead and turn off the heat. And let's go ahead and drop in our straining bags of tomatoes. Now the purpose of doing this is A, not to cook the fruit or tomatoes. It's to help kill off any wild yeast that might have been on the outside of the skins and hopefully take care of a little bit of the bacteria that might have been in there as well. Now because we don't use sulfites or Camden tablets, which would have been easier and quicker, well maybe not quicker, this is a pretty good alternative. So we're just going to let that come down to room temperature. Okay, now that the temperature has come down, we can go ahead and start adding in our sugar. And that was 4 cups of sugar. And in case anybody's wondering, yes, it would have been a whole lot easier to take these straining bags out and then start stirring. But they're in there now, so shouldn't take but a moment. Okay, I think that'll do it. Let's go ahead and put our lid back on. And let's get ready to go ahead and juice our lemons. All right, with our lemons now properly juiced, let's go ahead and add that to the mix, straining out any seeds. And I should point out the lemon does serve as adding some acidity to the musk. And it acts as our acid blend substitute. Let's get every little drop in there. Let's go ahead and put our cover back on while we get ready for the next step. Now would be a pretty good time to take our initial hydrometer reading. riding pretty high. There we go, it's settled down a bit. And looks like we're gonna come in at, overshot the mark a bit. Looks like 1.090. Overshot it by 10, but hey, it's still within range. It'll just be a little bit more potent at the back end. Now the next thing we need to do is we need to get our juice from here into our fermenter. I strongly suggest doing this over the sink, or at least have some towels ready. It can get a little bit messy. And I'll just fast forward through the rest of this operation. All right, put our lid back on and clean up what little mess was made. Now, to begin the process of turning our juice into wine, we need to add yeast, to which we will be using, again, 1/4 teaspoon of wine yeast. I'm using, again, Red Star Premier Blanc. If you don't have this, you can use this. It'll work just well. And all you gotta do is just sprinkle it. Try to get around the bags as much as possible. Just sprinkle it around. I mean, if you want to bloom your yeast, feel free. If you don't want to bloom your yeast, trust me, I've had nothing but success doing my wines and meads just like this. Let's go ahead and put our lid back on. Now, again, this fermenter does have its own built-in airlock. That's what the little red dot's for. If you don't have one of these, then again, you can use a standard airlock for your fermenter. Just make sure that you use one. And once again, that's because that yeast is going to produce CO2, and that CO2 needs a way to get out. Okay, let's move on to the next step. Okay, it's now time to label our creation. We are making tomato wine. We started it on this date, and our original gravity reading was 1.090. Now, this is the start of the process of primary fermentation. There are still several more steps that need to be completed throughout the next several months. However, more immediately, in the next 3 days, we want to go ahead and take our cover off, give it a good vigorous stir to help the yeast get a little bit more oxygen. First 3 days is all that you really need. You really don't want to do it, for the most part, anytime after that, because after that, at least 5 days after that, adding more air might start the process of turning your wine into vinegar. We don't want to do that. But to give our yeast a good start, we're going to give it at least a little bit more air to breathe for the first 3 days. After 5 days from today, we want to remove the straining bags containing the spent tomatoes that we put in there. They're no longer going to be needed. Besides, the seeds might create bitterness later on down the road, so we want to get those out pretty much as soon as possible. After that, we just put it aside somewhere where it's cool and dark and let it do its thing. In about, 6 or 7 weeks, we might want to rack it or transfer it from the primary fermenter container into our secondary, which is just another jug, basically. And that's to help get it off any leaks that might have started to develop down towards the bottom. And we'll be doing that periodically over the next several months until the wine has become clear enough to our liking. Personally, I usually do it over the process of 12 months before I start the process of bottling it. Now then, this process of racking, I have standalone videos for that. The process of degassing, back sweetening, bottling, pasteurization, all of those are standalone videos that you can find in my channel's playlist under winemaking operations. But aside from that, that's it. If you like what you see here, please click on the subscribe and notify buttons, and I will try and continue these on a more regular basis. Once again, hey, it helps to become a member. It also helps to become a Patreon. So again, I'll see you in the next video.